Hi, my name is Sarah, and next I'm gonna share with you my unit plan on literature. This is a unit in which I put a lot of effort and in which I have learned a lot during the process. Um, this is based on the topic literary device or literary figures. Um, I chose this topic because I think that it's very useful to know these tools for students. Because I think that if they know certain terms or concept or literature, they can use them in their writings, in their creation of stories. So I think that mm, maybe they can make more complex, maybe more, yes. They can use these terms in their writings, I think. And I also chose this topic because I think that if they have this knowledge, or they learn about this and how to use them, and how to do a simile, for example, a metaphor, repetition, a rhyme. If they know how to use these terms, um, they can be more critical when they read other stories, or when they, for example, read a poem. So yes, that is why I chose this topic. So to start, first, I want to explain the general information about the unit, and then I'm gonna explain each class. So, this is a unit for fourth grade students. The context is a bilingual private school in Cali, Colombia, and students are between 10 to 11 years old. They have a B2 level in English, and they are 12 students. About the duration of each class is 50 minutes. The topic is literary figures, and the general objective of the unit is at the end of the four lessons, students will be able to identify various literary figures and apply them in their own creative writing. That is the objective. Um, there is assume prior in knowledge, and is that consider that they are children from a private bilingual school in Cali, Colombia. I can infer, or I can imagine, that the children have a very good level of English. And this topic of literary figures, can be worked with them from a picture book. Of course, I don't forget that students are still learning, and of course, it will be necessary feedback, but I think that they can do it. Let's say. About some specification of the classes, is that the first class is a reading aloud session, an activity. The second class is an introduction to literary figures, I mean introduction to the topic, and recognition activity. The third class is a formative. There is a formative assessment through identification and application of learnings. And in the last class, there is a summative assessment and feedback through practice and a practice activity. About the assessment, um, I mean, um, although in all classes the teacher is guiding and providing feedback to their students, There is two specific evaluations, the formative and the summative. As I said, the formative is in the third class, and for this we have a checklist. The criteria, the criteria, the evaluation criteria are these ones. Then I'm gonna explain all of this, but I I want I want to explain these instruments of evaluation. So formative, as for the formative evaluation is a checklist. In the last class, that is a summative evaluation. There is analytical rubric. These these are the evaluation criteria. But let's see the the classes. So in class 1 is the reading aloud session, and the objective for this class is, okay, by the end of the lesson, students will be able to notice literary figures without being explicitly introduced to them. I mean, the teacher is not going to say like, this is a metaphor, this is a simile. No, she will read the story to promote conversation with them. She will ask several questions. In some of those questions will be focused on the literary figures, but not explicitly. And the picture book is When I Talk to God, I Talk About You. The author is Chrissy Metz and Bradley Collins, and the illustrator is Lisa Fields. This book has many literary figures, such as rhyme, repetition, simile, metaphor, imagination, personification, symbolism, yes. The reading environment, I mean, is like is a bilingual school, and I think that a good place it will be like this. Maybe a place where students play during the recess. Yes, and the teacher would make the place comfortable to read. That is the idea. But this is the materials, the book, of course, drawing paper, paper and colors, and tape if is necessary. And for this session, there is no assessment, of course, but just the teacher will be observing, taking notes about, I don't know, about what students say, and things like that. This class will start with a warm-up activity, but for this, the teacher is going to ask some questions like this: what is a prayer? Have you ever prayed before? And things like that. Then she starts the reading aloud session, as yes. Before, during, and after reading the story, the teacher will be asking questions, comments, and pointing out about each page for the book. In general, these questions or comments are about illustrations, like connection, relationships, assumptions, pointing literary device without saying the terms or concept literally. She will talk about the topics that story talk tell. Yes, like the reflection, vocabulary, the description, yes. So here I have like questions for each page, but I just want to say that in general is about the animals that there is in the pages, that in this case in the cover. So she asked question about the title, about the, I don't know, the animals, the colors, the things, about what they think, that the students think is the story and things like that. So this is some questions. But throughout the reading, there is some questions. For example, this one, in which the teacher have like to to make to I mean the idea is that the students through this book have like an introduction of the topic, but without they realized about it. So this is our question that can help for that, and is, what do you notice in this text? What do you say why do you say there are rhymes? And the teacher can point out words that rhyme through the story. In this case, in this page, like arrive and ice. And yes, because the book has a lot of rhymes, a lot of repetition, a lot of even simile metaphors, and yes. So that is the question. This is another question about literary figures. About the comparison in this case. But yes, the idea is not like the teacher say like this is a metaphor. Now the idea is that the students notice by themselves about this, but in a very, I don't know. Yes. This is another question. How many times have we read this phrase already during the story? For example, when I talk to God, I talk about you. This is a phrase that it's repeated in the book several times. And yes, so that is the idea. Bueno, yes. When she when she finished like the reading aloud session, the teacher reflects with the student on the story. I mean, of course, in this first class is like the topic prayer. Yes, but bueno, and so in this class she focused on that. So she reflects about the story. With questions, she introduces the story to an activity. In this case, she asked to the students like what other title would you set to this story, or what other cover would you do for this story? And the idea is that then when the students answer that those questions, the teacher invite them to do it, like to do the cover and to do the title. And that is the idea. The students do the exercise, and then they discuss about their drawings, their titles, and they reflect on everything discussed in the class, and this class ends. About the class 2, that is introduction to literary figures. This is the objective. By the end of the lesson, students be able to recognize different literary figures and provide some sample sentence. So in this class, again, there is no assessment, but the teacher is gonna give feedback, is gonna stay there. Oh man. So this is the materials, and the class the teacher starts asking question to remember what they talked the last class. So what did we do in the last class? What characteristic did the story we read have? Do you remember those characteristics? You identify some rhymes in the story, right? Like to talk about it. And yes, the teacher will open the book when I talk about you, and she she will tell them that those aspects that they have already identified, that the rhymes, that the repetition of certain phrases, they are like literary literary figures, and that is the topic that they are going to learn. So with slides, she defines what is literary device or figures, and she explains each one of them: rhyme, repetition, simile, metaphor, symbolism, imagination, and personification. These are 7 devices. Um, um, I selected these ones because these ones are, the students can find this device from the story. The teacher explains that these figures are used by writers and the purposes. She provides examples from the story. She promotes discussion, and yes, then the teacher asks for the students to create one sentence or 2 sentences for each literary device or figures. And the teacher, of course, will be giving feedback. Then there is a second activity in which students will be organized into groups, and the teacher will share some cards with each group, with which they will play a memory game. So there will be 14 cards in total for each group, since there are 7 literary figures that have been seen: rhyme, repetition, and yes. This activity consists of all the pieces facing down, so they can't see what it has. Each student on their turn will turn over the 2 pieces to see if the cards are related or not. The related cards are, for example, when one will have the name of the literary figure and the other one have the meaning. This activity will allow them to go deeper into the concepts seen, and the teacher, of course, always is giving feedbacks. And then is the closure of the class. In the third class is the formative evaluation, and the objective of this class is, by the end of the lesson, students will be able to identify literary figures and create a short story using these figures. These are the materials, the assessment of, it will be there is a peer evaluation and the evaluation from the teacher, but formative. And the teacher, okay, yes. The teacher start the class, inviting the students to play Tingo Tango, but the thing is that they will remember what they have seen in the previous classes. So to do this, they will play this game. She will pass a small ball to a student and say tingo tingo tango. The student will be passing the ball, and when the teacher says tango, the student who has the ball must answer a question from the teacher. If the student doesn't know the answer, they can pass the ball to a partner. so this partner can help him or her. Some guiding questions: what did we talk about the last class? What are the literary figures? Mention some literary figures. What is a simile or any other? Yes, then there will be two activities. The first one is a worksheet in groups of 4 people. That will be 3 groups. Students will complete a worksheet where they will have to match literary figures to example and select the correct figures according to a sentence. So they have to relate each one. Yes. The teacher always is giving feedback. The second activity is a creative writing a story. And so, still in groups, students write a short story in which they use 3 literary figures. The stories must have a beginning, middle, and end. And then there is a formative evaluation. Groups share their stories and provide feedback to each other based on a simple criteria provided by the teacher, that it will be this one. For this activity, the criteria for peer and teacher evaluation are this. So the story does have 3 literary figures. The story figures used are well exemplified, and the story has a beginning, middle, and end. Yes, the teacher do that. Then the closure. The teacher asks to the students to study the concepts that they have been learning, because in the next class, that is the last class, the fourth class, there will be a assessment. So in the first class, the objective is, by the end of the lesson, students will individually create a story using 3 different literary figures. So this is the materials. And about the assessment, here we have a summative assessment. Based on the identification of 3 literary figures in the story. When I talk to God, I talk about you, and the story that they will have to create. So to start the class, the teacher will bring a small band again, and they will briefly review concept with examples. The teacher will throw the ball to any student, so students must be attentive. The student who receives the ball will answer a question from the teacher, and if they don't know the answer, they can throw the ball to another classmate, so this classmate can help. This is the guiding question. What concepts about literary figures have we seen? Give me an example of simile, a metaphor, and yes. This will be very useful because, next, the students will have to use those concepts, so they need to review these concepts. So I think that this warm-up activity can help. The evaluation, the summative evaluation has 2 parts, and the first one is that the students will see in the projector the next the text of the book. When I talk to God, I talk about you. And yes, so this is how they would see the image in the projector. It is story, the text of the story, page 1, page 2, and yes. And the students must read the story that was read in the class 1, and in their notebooks explain 3 literary figures they found, mentioning what concept is. For example, in the page 3, there is a personification, and because so that is the idea. Just identify yes. There is the other part, that is part 2. And in this, the teacher will share in the projector the seven literary figures they have seen, and the students will select at least 3 figures and they will write a story using them. I mean, this is like the same story of the last class that was in groups, but this time is individually. So yes, they will select at least 3 figures and they will write a story using them. The story must have a beginning, middle, and end. And once the time to write the story is over, the teacher asks them for their writings and asks them to draw a cover of their story and color it. Yes. So, ay, ¿qué pasó? The teacher collects the stories. And then there is a revision, a pre-feedback. And while they draw and color their drawings about their stories, the teacher reviews their stories by skimming and scanning. I mean, very quickly, the teacher just review. And once the time to draw and color the picture is over, the teacher gives us general feedback to everyone. And then in the closure of the class, the teacher tells them that in the next class she will give them the rubric with individual feedback. And this rubric will allow them to know in which aspects they are doing well and in which aspects they need to improve. So that is the idea. And at the end of this class, of course, the teacher is gonna give again feedback, but just general, because in the rubric the students will be able to know what things they need to improve. So about the summative assessment, okay, it's an analytical rubric, and once the class is over, the teacher takes the writings to do the proper grading according to an analytical rubric that she established for this. This rubric will also consider everything that the teacher observed about her students during the previous classes. I mean, she is gonna grade, but not only what the students do in this last class, but she is going to take into account all the process that the students have during the previous classes. Also, this rubric will integrate the 3 types of knowledge or learning, which are conceptual learning, what they know about the topic; procedural learning, what they know how to do with the topic, I mean the practice; and attitudinal learning, which is their participation and disposition in the classes. This rubric will be focused on the learning objective of the unit that, again, I want to remember, which is at the end of the 4 lessons, the students will be able to identify various literary figures and apply them in their own creative writing. The evaluation criteria for the analytical rubric are these ones. Are identification of literary figures, that is in the page that, that is when the students see in the projector the text of the story that they have to identify. That is about this criteria. The second criteria is the use of literary figures. This is when the students create the story with a beginning, middle, and end, but incorporating the device of literary figures and the structure, that is beginning, middle, and the end, the illustration, and participation. But again, this is taking into account all the process of the students in the previous classes. So this is the rubric. The criteria has their points, let's say. So this is the maximum for structure, this is the maximum for illustration. Yes, so in this way is this rubric. um, that will be all. That is all. So yes. Okay, and that was my unit, and now I want to talk about the challenges I encountered while I was doing this planning. It was very complex for me to think about how to approach this topic of literary figures for children, because all the lessons plans that I made always always were for high school students, and at least eighth graders. So it was very difficult for me, like to think, to imagine how will be those activities for children. But I wanted to choose something that, I mean, because I know that for me, it's easier to think a unit for for older students, but I wanted to show something that will challenge for me, and this is definitely was like that. And yes, yes, and that is why I chose this grade. Of course, it was very difficult, but I feel very fine with in the result. I don't know if it's okay, but I learned a lot during the process. And another challenge was thinking about how this topic could have the summative evaluation, because when it comes to evaluation, I always try to look for activities which are like easy for the students. So to think about those activities, it was very difficult because um, I don't know. I didn't know how to do it, but well, I tried, and I hope that that it's okay. About my comment on teaching English using literary text. Not only by doing this unit, but throughout the entire English literature course, English literature 6 course, I have learned several things. For example, I think literary texts are. I'm sorry, my cell phone turns off, but well. Um, I think that literary texts are full of rich and varied language, because I think that these stories, for example, introduce students to new words, new phrases, or expressions that they might not find in another type of text, so or textbooks. So that is yes. Also, I think that analyzing stories or even poems can help students think more deeply, like discovers meanings behind words, understands characters' perceptions, for example. Um, yes. Another thing is that the books usually talk about different topics, of course, like love, I don't know, relationships, emotions, things. I mean, the books usually talk about topics or themes that can connect with its students. I think that this can create I mean, like, this can make the learning experience more meaningful, um, memorable. Um, yes, and also I think reading literature improves all the four skills: writing, listening, speaking, and listening. Um, so the students can express their ideas. Um, yes, they can improve these skills so they can know how to express their ideas more clearly. Yes, so that is what I think of the importance of using literary text in the teaching in general. I think I have learned a lot, and I don't know, I have learned a lot, and now I think that it is very important for all these points that I just said. Um, yes, that is it. Thank you and bye.